In Nova Scotia, most people think solar is not gonna work here due to the weather. However, with a latitude similar to France, we are actually better than Paris. In this video, a solar industrial association is going to show us the roadmap.
So we got two great presenters here today. We've got up first is going to be Lyle Goldberg, and he's our Policy and Regulatory Affairs Manager for CanSIA Nova Scotia. He's going to be speaking about a market outlook for the Atlantic provinces in solar out to 2030. So please welcome Lyle Goldberg.
CanSIA, Canadian Solar Industries Association. We've been around since '92, and we represent all facets of the solar industry, from installers, manufacturers, consultants, governments, utilities, etc. We've got about over 200 members across the country, and we've got about 10 members in Nova Scotia, and I'm trying to grow that market, and I see some of our members are here this morning, so thanks for coming. I'm the only CanSIA employee outside of Ottawa. We have a small staff of 5. So I was hired in July of 2018 to work with the local solar industry and bring the ideas from the local solar industry to government, and that's something I will continue to do in my role. And of course I work a lot with the Department of Energy and Mines, Efficiency Nova Scotia, NSPI, and other key stakeholders such as CAGBC, Quest, the Ecology Action Center as well. So in the fall of 2018 we contracted Induced with support from the Department of Energy and Mines to produce a Nova Scotia residential solar market outlook labor force study out to 2030, and it is available on our website, and I'll give you that information at the end. So basically the objectives of the study are to understand the deployment of residential solar out to 2030. What are the workforce requirements required to do the work? What are the gaps in skills and training and certification that need to be addressed? What are some of the economic development opportunities that present itself? And how can the current industry engage in the new technologies around battery storage and EV charging? We didn't spend a ton of time on those two topics. I will talk a little bit about that, but the bulk of the report is really geared towards PV. So if you're going to remember one slide from this presentation, this is it. So the key takeaways from the study were that the Solar Homes program is really the key to growing the market in Nova Scotia, the residential market in Nova Scotia, and the key is to have the incentives go down gradually over a longer period of time, and that's what we're actually seeing Efficiency do now. They've reduced the rebate from $1 to 85 cents as of April 1st, and I'll go over that a little later, what those models would look like. 178 megawatts is projected of solar PV by 2030, representing about 22,000 homes. By 2030, we're looking at over 1,000 jobs. 84% would be direct, 16 indirect. When we talk about direct jobs, that's more on the sales, installation, operations and maintenance, and engineering and design. The indirect jobs would be more on the manufacturing and distribution side. Limited opportunities for large-scale deployment of residential battery storage, with about 15 to 35% of new residential solar installations estimated to be stored with batteries by 2035. There's more opportunities in the ICI sector when we're looking at battery storage at this stage. And we're looking at about 20 to 70 FTEs could be supported in EV home charging installation services by 2030. And when I talk about an FTE, that's full-time equivalent job of about 40 hours a week, but it could be 2 part-time jobs equaling those hours. It's the same thing, so whatever combination would work. So some of the key solar market drivers, obviously the Solar Homes program, which has tripled the uptake of solar PV in 2018. By the end of 2018, we're looking at over 700 systems installed or ready to be installed at 5.5 megawatts. NSPI's enhanced net metering program is key, and it allows you to sell excess electricity back to NSPI at the residential rate, although they'd like you to obviously size your system appropriately. We have some excellent financing models here in Nova Scotia led by Solar City, the PACE programs, which stands for Property Assessed Clean Energy, And once Halifax introduced that, a lot of other municipalities followed suit, although they have limitations in terms of the amount of money they will loan. I can tell you that Solar Colchester just launched their program this year. They're oversubscribed. They had enough money for 20 applications. They got 38. So I think Colchester may need to put more money into it next year because obviously it's been successful. We've got Credit Union Atlantic in terms of private financing models. They're energy efficient financing, which would be similar interest rates to the PACE programs in around 4.5, 4.75, I think in around there. And then home equity lines of credit. Solar PV system costs, we have one of the lowest rates in the country right now. We're at about $2.50 per watt before the incentive. If you add in the incentive, I think you're down to about $1.60. That was at the dollar rebate. It may have gone up a little bit. But so now's the time to do it, obviously. Electricity rates, we have some of the highest residential rates in the country. They've gone up about 2.6% annually between 2013 and 2017. NSPI is holding their rate at about 1.7% for this year. Our study indicates it's going to go up on average about 2.7% per year. Could be more, could be less. We're not sure at this point. System output, that just looks at regional characteristics such as weather and annual sun hours and local installation characteristics such as roof orientation, pitch and shading, those kinds of things. And then system sizes, we're seeing average system sizes increase since the Solar Homes program was announced. The average size is about 8.9 kilowatts now. They were much lower before, and that could be because of increase in heat pumps, which are running heating and cooling systems. This is quickly just to compare Nova Scotia currently with some other growing solar markets in the US and Canada, just to see where we sit. Not too bad, considering, Alberta is a fast-growing solar market. I don't know what the impact's going to be with the election that just happened, but. And then our consultant looked at a number of modeled scenarios to ramp down the Solar Homes program. So I'm picking 3 here, but as you can see, the supporting the sustainable growth model, it has the incentive is reduced gradually over a longer period of time compared to the others. And this is the best model to prolong increased activity of solar PV. And this is our projections. If we follow the sustainable model, we're going to get up to about 178 megawatts in the long term over by 2030, which is better than the other 2 models proposed. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this slide, but some of the other things we may want to consider in Nova Scotia is a longer payback period for solar. That might increase uptake. If you look at, if you get a mortgage for a house, it's 25 year payback period. Why not have a similar for a solar system? That might increase the uptake. That's what some of the research shows. Also looking at other models like zero down loans and third-party ownership. And we do have a few solar companies now in Nova Scotia that are offering zero down now. And then net billing would be a change to net metering where the retail rate you would get back from the excess electricity you produce would be lower than the retail rate. Could be the wholesale rate or something else. That may, if that change happened, you may properly size your system better because you're not making a lot more money. So, and then alternative rate structures around higher fixed fees, peak demands, and time of use rates could all impact solar over the longer term. So the solar supply chain, we looked at these characteristics, and it's the results of the solar supply chain and labor force stuff was based on jurisdictional scans, interviews, and online surveys with the local industry. I think we have 15 participants in an online survey, and some of the larger companies outside of Nova Scotia that are doing business here now. So the key takeaways on the supply chain are we have strong growth in solar installation and related services. We have over 50 installers registered on the Solar Trade Network now. Local panel manufacturing will be unlikely. Can't compete with the Asian market and the European market, but we could have potential for balance of system hardware manufacturing. And we do have some examples of, like thermodynamics, for example, is doing local manufacturing of everything here. So we have a place to start and a good case study there. Strong opportunities for distribution. I'm aware of 3 large Ontario companies and BC companies. 3 of them are set up here now and have warehouses for solar distribution here in HRM already. And we have an advantage with our ports. R&D, of course, we learned about NSCC and Dalhousie yesterday, so we've got strong research in solar now. And you know, solar panels are going to have a lifespan of about 20 or 25 years, so Nova Scotia could be a key area to look at decommissioning or recycling of the panels. We have a strong history of recycling other programs, composting and things like that, recycling of the CFLs here, so that might be an opportunity for us. That's just quickly a graph of where the jobs sit. Again, most of them are in the installation side of things. Just wanted to talk briefly about induced jobs. So money that's diverted away from your electric bill that goes into other parts of the economy, for every $1 million saved, can create up to 10 jobs according to the research. So good news there. And then quickly, solar skills and training. Our survey responders outlined some issues around limited experience of the existing labor force as a short-term challenge, limited access to adequate courses, standardized and consolidated training and certification programs flagged as a key to the industry's growth, need for standard guidelines related to interconnection, electrical inspections, and municipal permitting. Tends to be all over the map. We've heard some concerns with electrical inspections, the delays between the rough-in and the second inspection. That's been a problem for some of our installers. Municipal permitting, I'm aware of HRM that has consistent permitting, and Municipality of Kings. Most of the municipalities don't have anything around this, and we may want to look at that at some point down the road. And I do want to commend the NSCC, who's actually created a 45-hour training program, basically a 101 solar installation program, which is oversubscribed currently. So a key recommendation out of this is that better marketing and advertising of available opportunities, because there's a lot of online training opportunities. But the other recommendation is to establish a hub for solar-related training and certification as a one-stop shop here in Nova Scotia. So that might be something to consider. And just quickly on the emerging technologies. On the residential side, again, battery storage with solar exceeds the benefits at this point. We're looking at 15 to 35% of solar PV systems coupled with battery storage by 2030, and looking at maybe creating 10 to 15 FTEs in this space. And then electric charging, some good opportunities here for the local industry who are willing to engage in this new space. And NSPI predicts 30,000 to 100,000 EVs by 2030 in Nova Scotia. So based on our projections, we're looking at 20 to 70 FTEs by 2030. And just in conclusion, we have a bright future for residential PV in Nova Scotia. We would like to maybe look at working with energy and other folks and efficiency on a follow-up study, solar study in the ICI sector. It's crucial that the province set new targets for GHG reductions and renewables in advance of the integrated resource plan. That's key to setting the future for solar in Nova Scotia. In terms of other initiatives we're working on, again, we're going to participate in the IRP to ensure solar is a key part of the renewable energy mix. We're working on a Nova Scotia Go Solar guide with Efficiency Nova Scotia for homeowners considering and going solar. We have a solar sales workshop that we're working on with Efficiency. We're going to do a follow-up Nova Scotia Solar Summit that we did with the Department of Energy last December. And of course, we want to build membership here in Nova Scotia, and if folks are interested in joining, please come see me.
All the policy dollars seem to be going towards residential, but where utility scale solar is already as cheap as the cost of residential with the rebate in it, how come, or is there more money, or are we trying to push the utility scale side of it as well, or are we just honing in on residential?
I can't speak for the province or Nova Scotia Power. We have put together sort of a net metering working group working with CAGBC Atlantic. And I think Sean Fleming would be on that group with us. So we're certainly looking at some of the issues on the commercial and industrial side. There's also opportunities with the DND lands with the federal government moving to zero emission buildings by 2025, so there's that piece. My understanding is that Nova Scotia Power does want to do some utility scale solar, but I'm not sure where they are with it yet, and we haven't met with them in a while. But that's certainly on our radar and something we, like I said, we would like to explore the potential for the ICI sector and solar in another report. You know, ideally, it'd be nice to do it this year to couple it with the residential. So that's kind of where we are. But we're certainly, it's a huge piece. It's something we need to include when we participate in the integrated resource plan. We're actually working to work with Power Advisory to assist us in moving forward with some of that stuff. And I know the EAC also wants to do some work on the IRP as well with solar. So we haven't, it's huge, it's very important.
Yeah.
I guess this would be a question for both Lyle and Dave. One of the things I noted, and you mentioned it, Lyle, is the continued healthy growth in solar electricity in Nova Scotia depends on that net metering policy, especially at the residential level. I think that there's, and Nova Scotia has one of the more favorable net metering policies in Canada. But I think there's some risk of that policy changing, and you alluded to that. But it could change in ways that would make solar less desirable to potential customers. I wonder if, did you give some consideration to that in the future market study as to maybe what some of the implications of that might be, or steps going forward?
Not a lot of great detail. There is, the report does reference some alternatives and some issues that you know, the utility has to address as solar grows, obviously, because it impacts revenues and things like that. And didn't get into a huge detail on time of use and other strategies that could be employed. I don't know, from my own personal perspective, like, I'm getting residential solar as part of the Solar Homes program. I'm not looking to make money off it, so I don't see it on the residential side personally. I don't see a big deal if they cut the, you know, if you were producing excess electricity and they reduce the rate that you would make. I mean, to me, I don't know if that's a factor for homeowners or not. Like,
is there any discussion going on that there will be a similar PACE program offered to all Nova Scotians? Because that's one thing I'm getting at some home shows and different things like that, you know, HRM's got a fabulous program, Bridgewater's all the ones you name, but there's many areas that don't have a PACE program that makes it so good for an installer and for the customer, of course, to have. So I don't know if you can answer that or not, if there's anything going on.
I think at the end of the day, it is up to each municipality. I was working for the Union of Nova Scotia Municipalities when HRM introduced their Solar City bylaw, and then a number of municipalities came to our organization and said we want to do something similar but had to change the Municipal Government Act, blah, blah, blah. So that was done. So it's up to, I think enough residents would have to go to council, you know, and say, you know, we want a PACE program. Now, they're not all the same either. Like some of the PACE programs offered in some of the rural parts of Nova Scotia only have like a loan of $10,000. Well, they've had zero uptake in solar PV because of that. And the other issue, I think, Kevin, if I'm not mistaken, is the payback, the savings to earnings ratio.
Yeah, it has to be like
It's 1 to 1.
1 to 1, so it's going to be a payback
problematic.
of, I think it's less than 10 years, I do believe, which with the rebate it does make sense now. But in most cases, the payback is, you know, without a rebate. I mean, solar thermal is probably about 15, 16 years, and solar electric without the rebate is about, you know, maybe 12 years or so. So I know that's been.
So HRM's got to go down. Bridgewater changed theirs, and theirs is pretty good now for solar PV, and Solar Colchester. I don't know if the other ones have kept up. I'd like to work with Clean Foundation on that to see if we can beef those up a bit and see it to encourage more solar PV uptake.
Perfect.